Terry Conrad is a longtime resident of Galveston. He and his family moved here from New Mexico in 1989 to open art studios for him and his wife, Deborah, as well as an art gallery representing local and New Mexico artists. Terry worked as a metal artist for several decades, doing architectural works and graphic pieces, most notably the Nob Hill Gateways commissioned by the Albuquerque Art Commission. When Hurricane Ike destroyed his studio, he opened Brainworks, Island Brainworks, which then became a Sarasate franchise. For over 50 years, Terry has been a seeker, a practicing Buddhist, and then Dharma teacher in the Vajrayana tradition of Tibetan Buddhism. Terry is the founding director of Project Clear Light, a 501c3 NGO sponsoring Dharma groups in the Texas prison system and offering Lojong mind training. Correspondence courses to incarcerates nationwide. He's currently teaching classes on contemplative practices and ethics on the TDCJ Ramsey Unit faith-based dorm. I welcome Terry for Absolute and Relative Reality.
Good morning. So I have to apologize to Mary. She asked me to talk about not absolute and relative reality, but the quality of absolute and relative reality we call interdependence. Isn't that right? Yeah. That's all right. That was my mistake. Oh, it was? Oh. Well, I'm going to cover it.
Well, we can just extend it to this.
No, it's part of the whole thing, isn't it?
Oh, I'm not the best. Well, you got to read it.
Here we go. So it's all going to fit together quite well, I promise you. It actually encouraged me to go a little bit deeper into something else, and hopefully I can share that with a little bit of clarity this morning. So I want to start basically with the idea that there's this idea of spiritual awakening. And the basic premise of spiritual awakening, I would state as being in integrity with reality. The assumption is that the greater integrity we have with reality, the less inclined we are to suffer. Okay? So this notion of suffering has been a central theme forever, literally forever. There's many people throughout the eons who have had insights and realizations about this. It starts to get clarified and kind of put down, so that it can be shared, in the Vedic teachings, in the Upanishads, and most notably in the Hindu tradition, but also with tremendous correspondence with the West. Greek philosophers regularly were going back and forth on the trade routes between Greek, as well as Mesopotamia, even Egypt, into the Indus Valley, kind of seeking out what are the latest insights. Where are we with this understanding of what suffering is about, what's causing it, and it was very early intuited that suffering is curable, and particularly the suffering that we cause to ourselves, which I like to call unnecessary suffering. Okay? And we all have this. We all experience this. And so this is what drew me to the Buddhist teachings. And basically the Buddha is saying that we can take responsibility for how we feel, for how we think, for what we do. And we do that by gaining greater insights into our true nature. So just like a broad swath of how we might want to understand reality, it's as absolute and relative. Kind of two qualities to reality: absolute reality and relative reality. I'm going to use, oftentimes I don't use notes. I'm going to use notes today because I'm going to try and cover a lot of ground here. So we could briefly sketch that the difference between absolute and relative is who we are and how we are. Who we are is kind of our true nature, our basic nature, our essential humanity. How we are is how we've been conditioned, how we think, how we tend to react or respond in a situation. And of course, the conditioning of how we are comes down to conditioned assumptions, preferences, beliefs, attitudes, opinions, all conditioned. Those are all conditioned. Those are all coming. We assume it's a very in our earliest youth, we're kind of taught what this is and what that is and who this is and who that is, and we also tend to assume that whatever the dynamics in the household is, whatever kind of food we're eating, music we're listening to, the neighborhoods we live in, we just assume this is how life is. This is the world, right? And it establishes preferences that we have for how we live, kind of based upon what's healthy or unhealthy, what's safe or what's dangerous. And so assumptions are just an essential part of growing up. But when assumptions and then preferences start to become beliefs, that this is how it is, thinking this is the way the world is, then entering into that comes maybe a partiality, bias, prejudice, where this is better than that. Rather than being healthy or unhealthy, safe or dangerous, now it's better and worse. So we get into a comparative thing, and if someone doesn't think or act the way we think or act or think we should be, one of my teachers said, you have to be very careful not to should on yourself, because all of our shoulds and preferences, can cause the difficulties. So who we are, though, is the more absolute reality. That was the relative reality. The more absolute reality is our essential nature, and we understand our essential nature as being essentially goodness and wholeness. Goodness is kind of an extension of the term godness, or a godlike quality. Wholeness, if you break that down, it's like holiness, right? Holiness. So godness and holiness are kind of where religious or more spiritual kinds of thinking come out of our essential nature of goodness and wholeness. So the different qualities of relative reality, which is a more outer reality, are interconnection, interdependence, and impermanence. So when I got the word about interdependence, which is fine, because it fits absolutely appropriately exactly what it is. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. But interconnection, we understand, is relationship. Right? Our relationships are an essential part of our reality. Interdependence, we can understand as intimacy. So we all have relationship, but there's a quality of relationship that's even more vital, which we can understand as intimacy. And then, of course, impermanence is change. Right? Everything that's impermanent is changing. So these three, interconnection, interdependence, and impermanence, come together as causes and conditions. Okay, so we can say that another aspect of reality is that everything we experience is coming from two sources. It's coming from causes and it's coming from conditions. Everything we think, hear, taste, smell, experience, whatever, feel, are basically arising from the two of cause and condition. So conditions, I'll start there, are kind of the more general state of things. Conditions are, well, like take the example of the weather, climate, right? Condition would be kind of what part of the globe we live in, what proximity we have to a large body of water or mountains or whatever. All of those are the conditions that are going to affect the climate of that location. So here in Galveston, we all enjoy the climate. In fact, probably many of us moved here because of the climate. Right? It's a big factor. But causes are more immediate. Conditions are more broad, more general. Causes are more immediate, like the weather. Okay? So you have climate on one hand. I'm talking to you, Stan. You have climate on one hand and you have weather on the other, right? And of course, weather, being much more immediate, tends to have kind of transient impacts, okay? So this is true of how we think and how we feel too. Our conditioned assumptions, preferences, beliefs, attitudes, opinions, shaping, how we think, right, are then impacted by immediate life experiences. So if I'm more aware that what I'm doing or what I'm thinking, how I'm feeling is arising from conditioning, my conditions, then my immediate experience of being happy, sad, disgruntled, irritated, frustrated, angry, joyful, whatever, has a greater dynamic to it, doesn't it? There's ultimately, having this framework of reality allows me to have a different sense of identity, a different sense of self, right? Not so defined by conditions, not so defined by causes, right? I have a sense of self where we can kind of understand these qualities of goodness and wholeness, kind of more essential to me. So my tendency to be irritated, frustrated with something or someone else is an expression of my conditioning, isn't it? And what they're doing is my reaction or response to that, to the cause of that. If I see that my part in how I feel, how I think, contributed to by conditioning, I can make a better response. It allows me, in other words, where the ancients intuited there may be a cure for the suffering that I caused myself, we're saying reality is the cure. Kind of seeing this linkage, kind of having a bigger picture of how things work, why I think the way I think. Not just how I think, but why I'm thinking that way, right? Could add a dimension to it where I'm not so invested in feeling like I'm different or you're different, which is kind of the essential cause of suffering. Thinking anything is different, right? We all have this unity, this wholeness, this goodness, right? This is a part of who we all are. So I think it's pretty obvious that many of the issues and problems that we experience both personally, community, socially, nationally, internationally, are coming from too much identification with being a certain thing and seeing someone else or something else as different. Right? So this is their challenge. So what about the absolute reality? That's all about the relative reality, right? Excuse me. In Buddhism, we have a word, emptiness. What comes up when I say that? Emptiness. When I'm talking about this in the prison, what comes up is empty, is void, nothing exists, And they say, okay, yeah, you must be a Buddhist because nothing exists, right? But emptiness actually is really quite a brilliant insight. Emptiness is telling us that, we're not defined by the causes and conditions of our attitudes, our opinions, our beliefs. We can understand that this quality of innate goodness and innate wholeness is possible because in reality, everything that we're experiencing is awareness. If we're not aware, it doesn't exist, right? Everything we experience is arising as awareness. So how do we understand this? How do we practice this? Well, of course, we know that the essential practice, if you want to know how to play the piano, you go find somebody who knows how to play the piano, right? If you want to know how to meditate, you go find a Buddhist. And so this is kind of where we're coming from, right? Understand that these ancient practices of meditation, contemplation, are vital to curing suffering. And that's essentially it. I mean, that's really what it's about, is can we live with ourselves individually, can we live in community with less suffering, less difficulty, less conflict, less misunderstanding, right? So if we have these kind of shared views of what reality is, you're not defined by what you believe. You're not defined by what you think, how you feel, what you assume, your preferences, right? It's true that a lot of these early teachings weren't immediately written down. We didn't have YouTube and other such skillful means to really keep track of what anyone's talking about. So many of the earliest Buddhist teachings, and also with Christian teachings as well, nothing was really written down for 100 or so years. But the earliest writings that we have about what the Buddha taught, one of his earliest teachings was, don't believe anything. Now, for a Hindu to say that, that's pretty challenging, isn't it? But what does that mean? Don't believe in anything means don't feel that what you believe is reality, is definitive, right? So in that sense, belief becomes a question. I believe this is true. I believe this is accurate. I believe this is authentic, right? And belief then is inviting us to go deeper. Well, okay, I believe that's true. Now I have the opportunity to actually look at it, to take the time, take the moment to reflect, to contemplate, to study, to meditate, and see, well, check this out. What depth does this actually resonate as being something authentic? And I have these reference points. If it doesn't align with goodness and wholeness, right? It doesn't have this quality of innate wisdom, innate compassion, right? Innate unity. If it doesn't have these qualities, then that can be a measure of things being good or not. Anyway, there's a whole lot more we can talk about here, and I'm going to run out of time. I'm confident of that. So in Buddhism, we have the term bodhicitta. Bodhi means mind, or means awakening. Citta means mind, right? Awakened mind, bodhicitta. And that's like a summary statement. So emptiness is inviting us to recognize bodhicitta. Just kind of filter out all the conditioned thoughts, feelings, attitudes, opinions, and just see, well, how does that resonate with innate goodness and wholeness, being innately whole and innately good. Right? So bodhicitta is a very skillful concept, and we could say emptiness then is this quality of bodhicitta. Okay, does that make sense? Are we resonating here? So how does interdependence then have to do with this? Coming back to that phrase, intimacy, right? If interdependence is intimacy, interconnection is relationship, interdependence is intimacy, why is this important? Why is interdependence important? So conditioned assumptions, expectations, preferences and beliefs, attitudes, create a sense of self-cherishing, causing me to feel we're different, right? Unconscious assumptions, preferences, etc., are basically running the show. Being more intimate, more present with how we think, how we feel, how we speak, how we act, allows us to recognize the interdependence of conditioned thoughts, feelings, and assumptions, causing us to feel we're different. Okay. That makes sense? Unconscious assumptions are running the show. Unconscious attitudes, opinions, preferences. So by being more intimate with myself, I'm giving myself this opportunity to kind of recognize where my thoughts, feelings, actions, attitudes, opinions are out of integrity with goodness and wholeness, the essential unity and wholeness of existence. So we awaken naturally to some degree, because we already have everything we need to awaken. Okay? We already have this innate goodness and wholeness quality. We already have the ability to pay attention. We already have the ability to study, to reflect, to contemplate. We already have the ability to meditate. So the challenge is learning how to meditate. We know how to study. We basically know how to think and reflect and contemplate. The challenge is knowing how to meditate, to knowing that I can sit still, notice the tendency to want to scratch, itch, move, right? And just let that be awareness, right? Just recognize that whatever I'm thinking, however I feel, whatever urges I have, are actually just awareness. It's just awareness, right? My tendency to want to, whatever. If I can catch it early, I can recognize it's just awareness. So this sounds more challenging, but it's really not as challenging as it actually is. Right? It's challenging just to rest in awareness. It's challenging just to sit still, just observe whatever's arising, right? And see that arising, that itch, that thought, that feeling is awareness. So interdependence, this quality of intimacy, is kind of letting me take some time with that. Intimacy isn't automatic, is it? It takes time to build intimacy, to build a relationship. We take it for granted in a family context, but in like a social context, we know that this is why we come together in this kind of a room, this kind of a group, with this kind of an emphasis, is to have a bit more intimacy on sharing concerns and working together on projects and whatever. All of these things are establishing greater intimacy, aren't they? Because we are interdependent upon one another. We could not exist without each other. We would not exist without each other. And it's obvious, isn't it? But things that are obvious are often not recognized for being so vitally important. So let me refer to my notes here a moment. Otherwise, I just get off and ramble, and I just sit here and talk. So dependence, intimacy, interdependence can also have kind of a negative connotation too, can't it? Not being independent enough, or being codependent, or So in all of these things, we have to be paying attention, and we have to basically to avoid, and I'm saying have to in the sense of avoiding unnecessary suffering. Right? If I want to cure myself of the unnecessary suffering I'm causing, I need to be paying attention. So this involves having a practice, like a weekly practice, coming to church, right? Where we're reminded of the importance of community. And we're reminded of the fact that each of us has lives, and none of us are getting any younger, and things are changing, right? So this is where reality is presenting itself, and our opportunity is to be more intimate with it. And what I'm suggesting or inviting here is it's also an opportunity to be more intimate with ourselves. So there are many resources for learning how to meditate, for learning kind of these different practices. Like with the inmates I work with, most of them are Christian, and some of them, when I start talking about things like this, kind of feel like maybe I'm challenging their beliefs, which I am, right? But not in a critical or negative or judgmental way. I'm just saying, let's just go deeper, right? It's fine. It doesn't matter where we start, what tradition, whether you're Muslim or Jewish or Christian or Italian or whatever it is you are, right? It doesn't matter, right? Right. We just start wherever we are. And we see this opportunity of being, just having greater intimacy with ourselves is going to be helpful. So we have a couple of things that when I say we, I'm talking about kind of Buddhist tradition. There's 6 qualities that we have, 6 innate qualities that we have that we all have, all human beings have. We call the six perfections. And these are the innate qualities that we already have that will allow us to awaken. I'm not saying be enlightened, okay? I mean, I'm awakened to a certain extent. We all are, aren't we? We all have a certain amount of awakening, right? Certain amount of understanding, certain amount of wisdom, certain amount of insight, right? Enlightenment, I don't know, that's a big one, isn't it? But let's just deal with the awakening part right now. We all have this opportunity to awaken, to be more awake, more aware, right? We all have that opportunity. So there's what we call the six perfections. Generosity, we all have generosity. Ethical self-discipline, we kind of know what's good, bad, right, and wrong. Patience, effort, we're all willing to make an effort, we wouldn't be here otherwise. Meditation and wisdom. These six qualities we all have. It's universal. Okay, that's a basis. There's also six elements of our humanity. We have spirit, we have life, we have awareness, we have virtue, we have cognizance, and we have intention. So I'm going to emphasize the last one, intention. Life's obvious, spirit, pretty obvious. Awareness, maybe not so obvious. Virtue, I mean, when I talk about virtue in the prison, and I make this assertion, you have virtue. You are virtue. It's just, you couldn't be alive without it. What are we talking about there? What does that mean, you have virtue? You have the capacity for love. Right? Love is essential. Connection is essential. It's vital. None of us would be here without it. So, for someone in prison, for me to say, you know that you have virtue. Basically, the question I ask is, do you know you're a good person? To every group I meet with in prison, I ask the question, do you know you're a good person? In your heart of hearts, doesn't matter what you've done, some people have done some pretty horrible things, no question about it, but in your heart of hearts, you know you're a good person. And only one or two out of hundreds I've worked with have challenged that. But even after conversation, they start to say, well, yeah, I have people in my life that I love, or I have been loved. Right? That's virtue. That sense of connection is what virtue is all about. Cognizance, we can all think, but there's part of intention, okay? How essential that is. And I think this effort to awaken can only come with the intention to do so. The effort to have a profession, to be a doctor, a lawyer, a mechanic, construction worker, whatever it is, can only come with an intention. I have to have the intention. My intention may be to make money, and I see this is something I'm interested in, so I'm following it. But nonetheless, intention is there, isn't it? So intention, I feel like it needs to be pointed out. Right? And I invite the intention to awaken. Right? And we're not starting from scratch here. And we're not starting all over here. We're just kind of like taking a dip in the stream. Right? We're just kind of letting that flow around us for a while and see the effect that it has. And the intention is basically to be more aware of being aware. Being more aware of being aware. Just being aware. I think like I have to be thinking about something all the time. I have to be doing something all the time. I have to be writing something down. I have to be studying something. I have to be reading something. I have to be listening. I have to be checking my phone. I have to be doing something all the time. Well, how about just being aware? Just sitting. Just being aware. This is meditation. It's practice in being aware of being aware. So that comes with a pretty clear intention. How am I doing for time? I'm close. Okay, good. That means it's not over completely. So anyway, I'd like to close with a prayer. Is it a traditional prayer? Essentially we did a traditional chant this morning to a very unusual melody, but very good. Yeah, that was excellent. So traditionally in Buddhism, what we're doing is recognizing that the reason we're awakening is to be not just avoid unnecessary suffering for ourselves, but also not to be the cause of suffering for others. Right? So there's this very clear intention that we're awakening for the benefit of all beings, not just for myself, right? Not just for my, so I have, my wife doesn't, or my friend or my child or my workmate or whoever, it doesn't grow every time I come in the room. Right? No, that's not true? Okay. Yeah. So anyway, this wish for all beings, so that we're not only are we awakening to avoid the unnecessary suffering causing ourselves, we're awakening to avoid causing unnecessary suffering to others. Right? So I'll do the traditional prayer. May all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. May we all be free from suffering and sorrow and the causes of suffering and sorrow. May we all remain undivided from the sacred joy already present in us, free from sorrow. And may we all in this moment come to rest in the great equanimity, free of attachment, aversion, and ignorance. May our feet always be on a spiritual path. May our hearts be open, our minds clear, and may all of our activities be beneficial. May I and all beings be whole, healthy, happy, and free. So I like to say I'm a teacher, not a preacher. So questions? Yeah, I'm asking if there's any questions. Okay. I mean, sometimes someone will ask you a question and other people will realize, oh yeah, that's what I wanted to ask that too. So sometimes asking a question in a group is helpful. Yeah.
Actually, I thought of one.
Good, I knew you would.
As far as the difference between relative reality and absolute reality, I'm wondering if one of the things that can cause that confusion is when the two variables are very close to the bound. Mm-hmm. Say like one is 1.00001, and the other one is 0.99999. Well, your mind doesn't like fractions, so you're just going to round them off.
Yeah.
Outwardly, they'll appear to be the same thing, and it's because of round off there.
Yeah, I think the understanding, Steve, is the fact that they're simultaneous. Absolute and relative reality are simultaneous. They're two qualities of things that are existing together all the time. Right? We have this relative, just like climate and weather. Right? Those are not incongruent and inconsistent with each other, are they? So you don't have to pick one or the other. They're existing all the time. Okay? Yeah, good. Anyone else? Please. Exactly. Mm-hmm.